This should be an interesting video. There's a lot of commotion around this topic, and most videos around this topic are normally negative, right? When it comes to AI, which is short abbreviation for artificial intelligence, most people are pessimistic and some people are optimistic. I would say I'm in the middle. I'm a little more skeptical. And the reason why I think it can be good or bad, I can see why it could go bad. Because when it comes to social media, I think social media started off great, had a good incentive, right? This idea that you can make friends and or just even talk to your friends online seems kind of cool, right? And then unfortunately now we get to see the full development of social media and we get to see what it's done to a lot of people, and it's done some good things like created a lot more jobs and a lot more streams of income to make money, but it's also done a lot of bad things, right, with mental health and stuff like that, or even things like bullying or stalking and just weird stuff like that, right? So it's done a lot of good and bad. So I think that's what might happen with AI. It can do some really good things, but it can also do some really bad things, right? One interesting thing when it comes to AI, I think, is there's been a lot of talk about how they're going to implement it into the medical field and use it for things like cancer, right? Um, well, what's kind of interesting about that as well is a lot of people don't get how cancer has been around for so long and there hasn't been like any like real cure. But the reason why I believe that it's not impossible, but it is very difficult because let's use this analogy, right? Let's say I have $1 million and I want to make a donation uh, between leukemia cancer research or breast cancer research, right? So I have a couple of options with $1 million. I can donate 1 million to leukemia cancer research alone, or I can donate 1 million to the breast cancer research alone, or I can split it up and donate 500,000 to the leukemia and then 500,000 to the breast cancer. So what I'm kind of bringing up with that one is I'm not too sure how the funding process works exactly when it comes to stuff like this. I don't know how the entire system works and how the money gets transferred and what goes into where. But because there's so many different forms of cancer, you can basically donate to like any cancer research that you want. So all the money and everything kind of gets split up. So let's say there's a very common let's say there's a very common cancer and then there's a very rare cancer, right? That very few people get. So most people are going to donate a lot of money towards the cancer that is more common because it's killing more people. But then the one that's more rare gets more neglected because there isn't as much funding for it, right? That's also what happens when it comes to disabilities and stuff like that, right? You see that as well. So that's kind of the one reason why I think that why it's been around for so long is why it's so difficult, right? I don't know if there's going to be a true cure for all the cancer, right? That'd be a miracle, right? But I don't know about that one, right? I'm not too sure. That's a very interesting one. Um, but yeah, now I went to a massive little rabbit hole there. Um, but back on the topic of artificial intelligence, right? Um, it's also going to cause a lot of damage as well. That's a big one. It's going to cause a lot of damage when it comes to the environment, right? That's one that people are talking about because in order to run this type of technology, you need these data centers. So these data centers apparently they're going to use a lot of water as well because they need it for the cooling systems apparently. And then of course it's going to use electricity, right? It's going to use a lot of power. I don't know if it's going to be power as powerful as like a nuclear plant. Maybe not that powerful, but I'd like to think it's something like that, right? It's going to be a lot of energy. So the good news though is Earth is made up of a lot of water, right? Is made from what I remember from high school or whatever. I think is mainly primarily made up of salt water, but there's some fresh water, right? But primarily mostly made of salt water, right? Which is why we have these things like filtration systems. Um, but yeah, that's one of the aspects when it comes to artificial intelligence is fact that's going to cause a lot of damage to the environment. Another thing that's going to do is it's going to replace a lot of jobs, right? So, but the interesting thing about that one is even though it's going to replace a lot of jobs, people are also saying that it's going to create new jobs. People working in the data centers, maybe manufacturers that are going to be building these AI or artificial intelligence or robots, right? I think what's interesting as well when it comes to artificial intelligence is right now we're seeing the form of artificial intelligence through software, right? You have things like Grok and ChatGPT, but these are like web design softwares, right? Still, a form of AI is almost like I guess you want to call it like an SEO engine. Hopefully, you got that right. I did a little bit of HTML a while ago. This was a couple of years ago. But I believe that's what it's called. I think Google is if I'm not a TS major, but I think it's something like that. It's like an SEO engine, search engine, right? I feel like artificial intelligence sort of is like that, right? You type in and you ask a question and it gives you a prompt or whatever, right? So it does something like that, but it's not like it's like a R2D2 or like a C3PO type of thing, like from Star Wars, where you get to see like a physical robot, right? So until we get to see a physical robot, then I think that's where most people are gonna realize, okay, this is a real thing. But until it becomes a real thing where I can see it in person, I don't think it's gonna be people aren't gonna acknowledge it as much, right? So that's my guess is that until we get to see physical robots, for the most part, I don't think it means anything, right? So that's my stance there. I think I'm gonna get off that, right? I think I covered what I want to talk about, and it's a very interesting time right now. Very exciting time. Let me know your guys' opinions. What do you think? Do you think it's a hoax? Do you think it's real? And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.